If you look up the word classic in the dictionary, chances are you might see a picture of this car.
It's a 1953 Packard Carribean or Caribbean, and it was produced by Packard in '53 to compete with Cadillac and a lot of the other specialty makers who made very specific models for that model year. And what they did was they took their standard convertible car, sent it to a coach building company. They made 750 of them, and they extended the back fender by 10 inches. They removed the fender skirt and opened the rear wheel well to match the front wheel wells, and custom designed the chrome moldings that you see. They installed the chrome wire wheels. They put a scoop in the hood, which necessitated a hood stay because the hood became too heavy to stay up on its own. And then they hired a company that designs Continental wheels, which was installed on the back, and the wire wheels, of course, were installed on the car at that point as well. And at that time, the cars sold in the $7,000 range, which was considerably higher than Cadillac that sold in the $5,000 range. So it made it a very expensive and exclusive car, and only certain people could afford it back then. It's a luxury car. It featured, of course, a full leather treatment on the interior, and everything on the car was power and was included in the price of the car. The only accessory was a backup light, which you could purchase in addition to the accessories you got with the car, which were power brakes, power steering, power windows, power top, power seat, power antenna, radio. There was an optional radio called a type of signal-seeking radio that they had. There were actually several different models in radios. The basic radio was a push button. The windows were hydraulic, and as the seat and top are, as opposed to electric. This particular car was painted at the very beginning of the 90s, so the paint job is probably 8 or 9 years old. And it was done by the proverbial little old fellow retired from the body business who had a lot of spare time in his retirement and spent an entire winter block sanding and painting and rubbing to get the type of finish that you see. It would not be economically feasible to go out and have that done. It can be done, but it would be extremely expensive because of the amount of time involved, which of course is the major cost in any hands-on type of endeavor. You're paying for the fellow's time. But in this particular case, this chap was able to devote a lot of time and get the desired finish. When you drive a car like that, I suppose you want people to see you going down the road and say, oh, there goes so-and-so in his beautiful car, and you can achieve that with a nice paint job, a nice paint color.
If the paint job doesn't get your attention, you might be impressed by just how rare this car is. Only 750 were built in 1953.
That was the highest volume of that model for any one year. They made less each subsequent year. The same body with a different paint scheme was used in '54, and then in '55 the car was produced with a V8 engine and a slightly different body style, more of a squarish style, in a tri-color paint scheme with different chrome and electric self-leveling system in the rear, and that was done for '55 and '56. But those were the only 4 years they produced that particular car. And as you probably know, Packard went out of business soon after. They amalgamated with Studebaker, and there were some Studebaker models that were called Packards and had Packard engines and so on. And then toward the end of the 50s, it was all gone, no more Packard. It's heavily desired, but not easily afforded. I think that's probably as the value of cars increases, obviously the window of opportunity diminishes for a lot of people, and so even though people like it and desire it and are interested in seeing it, not necessarily everyone can afford to buy a car like that. That's the standard routine, for example, of many car dealers who in years past would handle a very expensive car and a very inexpensive car, so that when people came to the showroom they could envy the expensive car and then buy the car they could afford and go home. But yes, it's a desirable car, and of course there are many Packard aficionados, and there is a large following for Packard. There are many Packard clubs and associations. They actually exist on the internet as well, and they have their meetings and their parts exchange people and technical advisors and so on. So there's a good support system for anyone who wants to get involved in the Packard movement.
This Packard would look great in anyone's driveway, but even better cruising down the road.
It drives like a 50-year-old car. It's large, it's comfortable, it's capable of good speed, but it does not handle with sort of split-second timing and so on. Although there are some good, interesting promotional shots of this car that were taken by the factory going through its paces at test tracks and leaning heavily into turns and skidding around corners. It was a powerful car. It was capable of doing a lot of things. It weighs 5,000 pounds and it's 21.5 feet long, so obviously agility is sacrificed to some degree.